What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a Friday edition of Mile High Hockey. Drew Spivak, Will Peterson with you live right now on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all the good socials. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, please, and leave a comment if you are so inclined. Drew, what a fun night at Ball Arena last night. The 1996 Stanley Cup champions, 95-96, got honored. 30-year anniversary of that squad beating the Florida Panthers. Of course, it was fitting that Florida was in town. This current version of the Avalanche team smashed with a 6-2 victory. But let's start with reunion because that's always super fun. Great turnout. Had 17 guys back in town of 25 on the team. You know, Adam Foote couldn't come here. He's a head coach. Patrick Waugh couldn't come. He's a head coach. But 30 years later, you just told me off air, and I agree with you. 30 years is a long time. To get 75% of the guys back together was cool. They had an event Wednesday night, and then were honored pregame last night in the building watching the game. I think definitely brought back some memories for a lot of Avalanche fans.
Yeah, and I was trying to think back, watching that a little bit last night, trying to think back to my memories from it because, 1996 when they raised the Stanley Cup, I was 15 years old. Hockey was a new thing here, but it wasn't really new to me because I grew up, going to DU games and watching the Blackhawks on WGN and stuff like that. So I was a big hockey fan when they got here, and it was really cool to see we finally got a team, and then being as good as they were was awesome. But I was just trying to think back to all of my memories from it. And I'm like, well, I remember the first game against the Red Wings, and then I remember the playoffs. But in between that, I don't really remember a whole heck of a lot of the whole thing. But really cool memory to go back and see that. Really cool that many guys showed back up for this. I mean, 30 years later, it's cool to see. Like, we see Joe Sakic all the time. We see Peter Forsberg around, but see guys like Mike Ricci and Val Kaminsky and stuff like that. Just a really cool thing. And I wonder if the Panthers were feeling weird about it because the Stanley Cup's out on the ice
right
beforehand. They're like, wait, this is our cup that we've had the last 2 years. What the heck is this thing doing here? But yeah, really cool thing to do. I can't wait for the one, when they do it in a few years, when they celebrate the 2001 team as well. That's going to be really cool. But a really cool event last night. And even better, the fact that they go out and just hammer the Panthers on national television.
Yeah, no, it was great. And it's funny because you're looking at the guys who are here and you recognize all the names, but your mind does go to, well, where's Ray Bork? Oh, well, Ray Bork, of course, wasn't on the 96 team. Where's Rob Blake? Rob Blake wasn't on the 96 team. Milan Hayduk, Alex Tate, it does, the Sakics, the Forsbergs, the Waughs of the world. But there was a turnover between 96 and 01. You mentioned Mike Ricci, Mike Keane, Claude Lemieux, Valerie Kaminsky. Claude Lemieux looks great, by the way. And gosh, him and that, 30 for 30 doc, the Red Wings and all this and that, and the bad blood he had with Detroit when that rivalry was peak, brought back a lot of memories for sure. So cool to see all those guys in town. And you're right, the cup being on the ice against the Panthers, who have ironically won the last two. This was not scheduled to try to show up the Panthers. It was scheduled because that was the team that they beat in 1996. Let's talk about the actual game. And then we can take a quick peek back at Tuesday as well, because a lot happened in Nashville with the Avs and Predators. But last night, let's begin there. It's 6-2. Game that was never competitive. It was 2-1 after one, but they had 20 shots on goal, which was their most in an entire period this season. And I put it on social media at the time. I said, this thing could get ugly because the Panthers had played last night in Utah, and that's certainly what happened. Avs made it 5-1 after two, and then Gabriel Landeskog gets a goal in the third. They end up winning 6-2. Drew, these games at Ball Arena right now aren't exactly competitive. They're playing some tight ones on the road, but it feels like teams that come into Denver are just getting steamrolled out of town.
Yeah, it's so much for that old theory of, the first game back from a road trip is always the toughest game to, go out and win. You come back from a 4-game road trip, you're coming back on a game you lost in a shootout, and you're playing a team obviously on the second night of a back-to-back, but to just come out and dominate the way that they did from basically the opening faceoff, really, really cool to see. And you mentioned, the fact that they're just destroying teams at home. I looked it up last night. I was trying to kind of do some math with it as I'm watching the third period. And if my math is right, in the 14 home games this year, they've outscored teams 67-31.
Wow. Doubled them up and then some.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. You look what they've done. The Montreal game where they scored 7, the Jersey game where they scored 8, the San Jose game where they scored 6 goals again last night. I think it's 8 times now they scored 5+ goals in a game. I mean, it's just absurd what this team is doing right now on home ice. And they kind of alluded to it a little bit last time on the ESPN broadcast. Is we've always talked about home ice advantage being really big in Colorado in general.
Mm-hmm.
But now that you've got a hockey team in Utah, you're going to see a lot of these teams go on a back-to-back where you go to Utah one night, and then you come to Denver the next night. good luck for those teams that have to go do that, because you got to go play a fast-paced, high-power team in Utah one night at altitude. Then you got to come back the second night at altitude in Denver and do it against this hockey team. Yeah, good luck with that. That's going to be a challenge for any team that has to do that. But really encouraging to see so many guys get on the score sheet last night. My guy, Gavin Brindley, comes back.
You were early on the Gavin Brindley train. I got to give you some credit there.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way that kid plays, the speed at which he plays with, his hockey IQ. It's incredible. And to see that it was him and Brent Burns together, the youngest guy on the team, the old guy on the team. They mentioned on the broadcast that Gavin Brindley wasn't even born when Brent Burns made his debut. I mean,
that's nuts.
It's crazy to sit there and think about it. But
yeah,
having him come back, go on the third line, and just fit right in seamlessly. Val gets bumped up to the second line was really cool to see. That second line had a really good defensive game last night. So there's just so many good takeaways from that game. And Mackenzie Black with just a quiet little, 24-25 save performance. Just a lot of really good, encouraging things from a team that just has had nothing but those all season long.
Yeah, I'm going to try to remember all 6 goal scorers here. Let's go. Sam Malinsky scored the first. Brindley scored the second. Brock Nelson scored the third. Nathan McKinnon scored the fourth. Arturi Lehkonen scored the fifth. And Gabriel Landeskog scored the sixth.
Sounds right to me. Yeah.
6 different goal scorers. We'll take that all day, every day. And we'd be remiss if we don't mention what also happened when Nathan McKinnon scored the 4th goal of the game. He passed Joe Sakic with 392 goals in an Avalanche sweater. Now, we've got to be careful here. Sakic holds the franchise record, 625 tallies, because he had 7-8 great years in Quebec before they moved to Denver. But still, anytime you're passing Joe Sakic in anything, Drew, that's a big deal. Joe scored 391 goals during his time with the Avs, and Nathan McKinnon gets to 392 last night. Just another feather in his cap. He hasn't caught Joe yet, in my eyes. Joe's still the best player in franchise history. A large part of that is 2 cups to 1. But there definitely could be a conversation 5, 6, 7 years from now. Nathan McKinnon is now the best player in Avalanche history.
See, I actually already think the conversation needs to be had.
Ooh, because this early. Okay.
Now, because you talk about goals, obviously Nate's up by 1 now. Nate had already passed him in total points. Now, you look back at Joe, he had 2 Stanley Cups, won a Conn Smythe, won a Hart Trophy. Nate's won a Stanley Cup. He's won a Hart Trophy. He's on his way to probably his second one this year. I guess in theory, you think about what does Nate need to do to be considered the greatest player in Colorado Avalanche history. Probably needs another Stanley Cup. He needs to get that second one. I don't even really care all that much about another Conn Smythe. It's such a subjective award.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back to the year.
And he lost it to Cale Makar. It's
right.
Like, whatever.
And I actually thought that year that it should have been Val Nichushkin.
Right.
Over Cale.
They had 3 good and Nathan was in that conversation too. They had 3 good candidates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I think the kind of the caveat here is that you look at when Sakic did his damage in a Colorado jersey, the game was so much different back then. That was the dead puck era where scoring was a lot harder to come by, unlike now. And to see the numbers that Sakic put up during that dead puck era was pretty incredible. Like he put together some phenomenal years. But I was looking at the stats this morning, and Sakic had 3 100-point seasons. Nate's had 3 in a row, and he's about to have his 4th.
Yep.
Here in the next,
gonna smash.
Yeah, I was gonna say
points,
here in the next, I don't know, 2 months. By the time we get to the Olympic break, he might already have it. So I think it's worth having a conversation. If you had to ask me right now, I'd still probably lean Joe Sakic by like a hair, but it's close. And I think the fact that we're even having this conversation and knowing that Nate's going to play another, 7, 8, 9 years in the Colorado Avalanche jersey, there's no question he will be the greatest Av of all time. The only question is he already there?
Yeah. When does it happen? That will be fun to watch. That was what was so interesting about Nikola Jokic on the Nuggets side is I think we all had that realization like 3-4 years ago, like, oh, he's the best player in Nuggets history. But also the Nuggets don't have, they have some fun moments, don't get me wrong, but they don't have the same storied history as the Avalanche do. All right, 2 more things I want to get to before we get out of here. I want to talk about the Gabriel Landeskog, Eric Johnson interview that aired on ESPN last night. I wrote about that today at denversports.com. First, though, just got to get it off my chest. What happened in Nashville was so weird, Drew. Cale Makar ties it with 8 seconds left, his first power play goal since last April. Avalanche had a 6-on-4. Anyone who knows hockey knows you get a 2-man advantage, 5-on-3 even better, but 6-on-4 with the goalie pulled. You got to find a way to do it. So that was awesome. But then the shootout in Nashville was so bizarre. Scott Wedgwood takes a hit from Philip Forsberg, and he hit his head. He hit it on Forsberg. He may have hit it on the ice, but they let him face another shooter. And then a concussion spotter comes in and says he's got to go out of the game. Blackwood has to come in. Doesn't end up mattering because Gabe Landeskog can't score. So Blackwood never faces a shot. But, man, talk about the highs of the highs with the Kale goal to tie it, get a point, which is great because Dallas, every point matters, but also sort of the lows of A, they lost another shootout, and B, the whole thing with Wedgwood was just bizarre.
Yeah, it was. And it seems like weird things always kind of happen in Nashville. When we talked about it on Tuesday, I was weary of that game. I was like, this is going to be a difficult task going into Nashville and doing this. And it proved yet again that the Predators maybe played, I don't know, their best game of the season against the Avs. But that whole overtime and shootout thing was very, very bizarre. The good news is, at least with Scott Wedgwood, Bednar said it wasn't head injury. That's encouraging. He just tweaked his back. But on the concerning side is like, all right, now that's the second time in as many games that Scott Wedgwood has tweaked his back. So you kind of hope that this doesn't become kind of a lingering type issue this year. And, I made clear, you and I have kind of talked back and forth on this, and my stance on the shootout. I don't generally care about it, but I'm actually starting to care a little bit. And here's why, because you are in a dogfight with the Dallas Stars right now. I mean, it's a 4-point lead as we sit here today after Dallas loses to Minnesota last night. Knowing the fight that you're going to be in to win the division, get home ice, whoever's, get the best, the home ice advantage in a series whenever you play Dallas, whether it be the first round, second round, conference finals, whatever the case may be. It's not going to be conference finals, but you need as many points as you can get. This team has got to figure it out in the shootout. I know aesthetically, I don't care about it, but they need to start caring about it because they've got to start getting every point. I mean, they're leaving points on the table. I think it's 0-4 in the shootout this year. That's 4 points that you could have a 4-point advantage on Dallas this year. So whatever they got to do, they've got to figure out how to perform better in the shootout. I know they don't practice it, but maybe they got to figure out a way to start to sneak in some practice because it may come back to bite them the way Dallas is playing right now.
Yeah, no, it totally could. And you don't want to be looking at the standings in early April going, oh, we're 2 points back, but we've lost 7 shootouts, right? That would be an easy way to have made up those 2 points. I'm with you. They got to flip a switch somehow because inevitably there are going to be more shootouts on the docket this season. All right, found that Gabriel Landeskog, Eric Johnson interview really cool. Aired on ESPN2 last night. It's making the rounds on social media. You can go check it out at denversports.com. But a few things stood out to me. One, Gabriel told EJ that his oldest son was thinking that maybe dad was pulling a fast one on him. Was he actually good at hockey or not? Gave him extra fuel to come back. 2, if they win the cup, he wants to hand it to Brent Burns, which EJ asked him. I thought Gabe would totally dodge it, but Gabe said sometimes you have to manifest these things, which I like about, we think of hockey players as superstitious. He wasn't afraid to talk about it out loud. Plenty of takeaways. I would encourage people to go watching it, but those were the kind of 2 that stood out to me. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that stands out to me is EJ is pretty good at this.
This he has transitioned smoothly.
He really has, man. Yeah. It was an easy interview. Now, granted, it helps that you're doing it alongside one of your best friends from the team and a guy that you played with for so many years in an Avalanche jersey, but in the comfort of his basement, which I'm sure you've been in 100 times. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's really cool to see. And it was cool to see, Gabe kind of go through that. And, EJ even kind of just like said above, like, well, I know you're not going to answer this, but like, it just shows how much Gabe Landeskog means to this team and how much they've missed him over the last couple of years for me. Like, it's just obvious the way that they look up to that leadership in the locker room and the way he is off the ice. And I loved the answer about how he said, yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Brent Burns. Yeah. He kind of had to be prodded a little bit to get there. But I mean, that's the obvious answer. You think back to Joe with Ray Bourque, you think back to Gabe, handed it off to Eric Johnson, and now you're going to be like, hey, you're going to hand it off to Brent Burns, who's in his 20th season and never won a Stanley Cup. So, yeah, really cool interview. Definitely go check that out. It was really fun to see. And just, man, you just hope that the Gabe's going to be there at the end of the year to hand off the cup to Brent Burns if he can stay healthy. And he just continues to play really good hockey. And it's really encouraging to see that he hasn't had any setbacks. He's still practicing every day. Now we got the Olympics coming up. He's probably going to play in that. Hold your breath, cross your fingers, all that stuff for that. But just a really cool thing getting to see Gabe now get to show his kids the kind of player that he was and still can be. And then now his kids are old enough to kind of appreciate the kind of player and person he is. Yep. And you mentioned something that triggered my third takeaway that I had forgotten, was that he wasn't going to take the credit for the Avalanche being this good, but EJ was the one basically telling him, hey, you guys are the best team in the NHL because you're back. And that's something you and I have talked about on the pod a lot of, like, McKinnon's a great player. Kale's a great player. Gabe's the best leader on that team, and having him back is massive for these. Well, and EJ mentioned it because he talked about, as the captain, the different roles you have to play. You have to manage some egos. Yeah. And he mentioned Gabe, or, he mentioned Nate and Kale specifically. He called Kale McCarr a science nerd. he's not wrong. I mean,
I know.
we-
I've talked to Kale, several dozen times, but it's just like, oh, he just called him a science nerd. And
Yeah.
Kale is a little nerdy. There's nothing wrong with being a little nerdy.
he is. And I mean, Kale's kind of like the shy, kind of quiet type.
Yeah.
And you contrast that with Nate, who's just intense all the time. He's
Scary,
probably
almost.
scary. It is. It's
Yeah.
intimidating. And in order to be a good captain, you have to manage that. You have to manage those egos and different types of personalities. And I don't think there's anybody in the league that could do it better than what Gabe Landeskog does.
No, I'm with you. It's such a major addition for the Avalanche. And the fact he's played in every single regular season game is just absolutely nuts. All right, we went a little long today, but tons to unpack. So thank you for riding along with us. We'll be back on Tuesday for another edition of Mile High Hockey.